Ladies and gents, welcome back. NPR, National Public Radio, has been labeled on Twitter with the U.S. state-affiliated media label. Now, many people are asking, why not CBC? Well, we'll get into that soon enough, but let's cover this story here. National Public Radio has, on Twitter, been officially labeled as state-affiliated media. Accounts that are controlled by certain official representatives of government, state-affiliated media entities and individuals associated with those entities. And while, you know, the media is not really particularly happy about this, but it has been a lolcow on the internet, that's for sure. Not the Bee, which is the Babylon Bee, a satirical website who does Not the Bee is their actual, like, they run real articles on it. LOL, Twitter has just labeled NPR as state-affiliated media, and NPR is big mad because how propaganda outlets in other countries are labeled. Yes, this is right. This is well, essentially propaganda from the left in America. When pushing for taxpayer money, NPR labeled itself public sector and public service organization. But when Twitter accurately terms NPR state-affiliated media, the company protests that it is being unfairly labeled. It is the truth. They would like to pretend it's otherwise, says Dinesh D'Souza on Twitter here. Now, even Fox News chiming in. NPR labeled state-affiliated media on Twitter, same as Russia's RT and China's Xinhua, or is that Xinhua? I'm not sure how to pronounce that correctly, but yeah, those are, yeah, absolutely state-run media apparatuses. Donald Trump Jr. even chiming in on this one.
They say, we are all disturbed to see last night that Twitter has labeled NPR state-affiliated media, a description that per Twitter's own guidelines does not apply. NPR and our mother stations are supported by millions of listeners who depend on us for independent, fact-based, another great joke, journalism that we provide. National Public Radio. Yeah, it's not state-sponsored radio. Of course it is. It's the radio channel of the regime. I don't know that anyone actually listens to it, but we spend millions of taxpayer dollars funding NPR, also known as not particularly reliable. It's been...
So, and there has been arguments online saying, well, it's not that much money that gets donated to NPR. Now, there's a clip on Tucker Carlson that actually lays that one to rest. And here's a perfect example of how this stuff works.
Report on it on the radio. Was there ever a question in your mind that this was state media?
Not at all. Our mutual buddy Chris Plant calls them National Panhandler Radio, appropriately, NPR. And you know what's amazing about this? They're trying to prove that they're not state media, and they're relying on everyone who's funded by the state in order to make that defense. So Karine Jean-Pierre stands there at the White House press briefing and says NPR is so independent. She gives a Braveheart-style speech attesting to their independence. Do you think she would ever do that for Simon Atiba? Like, not in a million years.
No.
Not in a million years. Of course, it's for NPR. NPR cited Yoel Roth, the former head of censorship at Twitter, as a guy who said they shouldn't be labeled state-affiliated media. Yoel Roth and Twitter at the time were making millions of dollars from the federal government to censor the American public. These are all completely biased people. And one last big thing that I noticed about this, Tucker, they say in all of their defenses, well, only 1% of our funding, less than 1%, comes from the federal government. Even that is deception. Even that is a lie. NPR is a content organization. The 1,000 member stations that they send content to all pay fees to NPR. Guess where they get their money from? That's right, the federal, state, and local governments. As much as 23% of all of their funding comes from there. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, and here they are playing a shell game. And the only type of organization that plays that kind of deceptive shell game, not a news organization, one that is running a political operation on behalf of the government.
So hundreds of millions of dollars to the tune of propagandizing hundreds of millions of people in the United States. CBC wanted to chime in on this one, and we're going to get into why this is really, really interesting. Twitter puts state-affiliated media label on NPR account. NPR has requested the label be removed. Twitter has labeled National Public Radio as a U.S. state-affiliated media on its main account, a move the head of media company called unacceptable. It's unacceptable that they did that. It is unclear why Twitter made the move. The label appeared on NPR's main Twitter account on Tuesday. Twitter's owner, Elon Musk, quoted a definition of state-affiliated media in the company's guidelines as outlets where the state exercises control over the editorial content through financial resources, direct or indirect pressures, and or control over production and distribution. Here's a clip of Justin Trudeau a number of years back talking about why the liberal bias is in the media.
You sometimes hear about liberal bias in the media these days, how they're constantly letting our government off the hook for no good reason. Frankly, I think that's insulting. It's clear that they let us off the hook for a very good reason, because we paid them $600 million. You don't get stellar headlines like these without greasing the wheels a bit.
No, you don't. You absolutely don't. Now, for context, that was him making jokes at a press or at a gala, but there is always a lot of truth to these jokes. In fact, what was a little less truthful was exactly how much they were paying the media to have good headlines for them. Viva Frei points out CBC and Radio Canada are literally crown corporations owned by the government, subsidized by Canadian taxpayer dollars. It gets over $1 billion in government funding. It deserves the same label of state-affiliated media as NPR, Elon Musk, even more so given the extent of the government funding. So if you look here, here's National Post saying CBC-sponsored content division called Tandem was put on hold briefly due to the controversy over the initiative, but then resumed. Last year, the CBC got $1.4 billion in government funding. Forget hundreds of millions. $1.4 billion. That's thousands of millions. According to the CBC's annual report, a figure that includes $36.7 million advance from this year's budget. A spokesperson for the CBC that its current advertising revenue is just under $254 million. So only $254 million collected from, ad revenue that they make when they're running these articles. The rest is funded directly from the government. Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, branded as CBC or Radio Canada, is the Canadian public broadcaster for both radio and television. It is a federal crown corporation that receives public funding from the government. The English and French language service units of the Crown Corporation are commonly known as CBC and Radio Canada, respectively. It's unbelievable. So yes, CBC does not yet have on theirs the state-affiliated media, when they shouldn't even be state-affiliated, state-run, absolutely state-run propaganda organization. But here we are, and people are actually absolutely being vocal about this on Twitter. Elon Musk, when will you apply the state-affiliated media tag to all the CBC accounts? CBC is fully funded by the Canadian government. It's unbelievable. Yeah, none of them have that. Paul Mitchell saying CBC is government-funded propaganda. All of these gold check marks should be turned gray, Elon Musk. Please do this favor for Canadians. Yes, please do, obviously. Now, what has CBC been doing recently? Well, here's an article from True North News talking about Smith. This is Danielle Smith in Alberta, political rival to Justin Trudeau in recent times, especially over what's going on between the provinces and the federal government. Smith is putting CBC on notice. Why? Because of defamation from the CBC. The state-affiliated media is running hit pieces on political rivals of Justin Trudeau and the federal government. And while, yeah, of course, this is largely due to, the animosity between the province that doesn't want to be run by the federal government and the premier of the province, Danielle Smith, standing in the way. So they're running untrue articles about discussions to do with the justice system in Alberta. I'll leave a link in the description so you can check out the extent of that in particular. But yes, she may be taking them to court for libel over this issue. What else has CBC been doing lately? Oh, here, what's this? CBC Arts. Drag queens were hugely popular in World War I. Remember them as the current war on drag intensifies. To which, of course, they block all comments after tons and tons of comments start flooding in. Some of these I can't even show on YouTube. Of course, I just want to read some books to your chickens comment. And so is this, points out John Chappelle on Twitter, that this was also something that was going on during World War I. Are you sticking up for that, CBC? Of course, this was not a drag show being portrayed here. This was some of the theater events that would take place during World War I, where there wasn't women to be there to play in the acts, to, of course, boost morale to a bunch of men who are going to be going to almost their certain death in a battle against, the forces of evil, as we've seen with World War I. A lot of men laying their lives down for our freedoms at that time. And this is some sort of weird revisionist history from the state-funded broadcaster on their Twitter account. Here we have Mark Vendermaz, Canadian refugee in Ecuador, saying, our moving coordinator had contact from CBC reporter in Atlantic, Canada, who wanted to interview me as the founder of the New Brunswick Free Province project. I told her, tell them thank you for your interest, but I don't do interviews with state-funded media. This is in reply to, upon seeing what happened to the BBC, Trudeau's CBC bites its lower lip and experiences government-funded journalistic dysphoria. And yes, the BBC has also been given this label. So here we are. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Should the state-funded or state-affiliated media tag be added to all of the CBC accounts on Twitter? I believe they ought to, given the circumstances. But let me know in the comments down below, and we'll see you in the next one. Keep on trucking.